Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. For this month's Birds Notes program, we're going to see some of the new technologies that are being used to learn more about the many facets of birds' lives. Joining us from the Audubon Center in Huntington is bird expert and conservation biologist Mark Labar. Thanks for being with us, Mark, yet once again.
Always great to be here.
So tell us about some of these new tools that researchers are using to better understand birds.
Yeah, so folks might remember back in 2016 and 2017, we did some work here in Vermont using a new technology relatively new, called a geolocator, which is a small backpack that we placed on golden-winged warblers here in the Champlain Valley, basically to see where these birds were wintering and what migratory pathways they were using to get there and back. And so you can see the backpack here on this golden-winged warbler, a small device that basically uses sunlight and length of day in order to determine positions, latitude and longitude, and that's a way for us to be able to track the birds and see where they're wintering.
That's amazing and clearly doesn't bother them. So what are there other things that you learned from this besides, like where they go? And
yeah, so it was important in that we found that our Champlain Valley birds were going and spending their winters. And you can see here from the map, the blue dot is kind of the starting point. And these geolocators are not pinpoint accurate, but you can see that this bird migrated down through Florida, hit Cuba, and then wintered in Central America, Costa Rica, and Panama. And this is pretty important because it tells us that our population is more aligned with the Midwest population. And the Central America is a much more stable wintering area for these birds. And so we were comforted to know that our birds were going to a place that was good for them in the winter. The Appalachian population tends to winter further east into Venezuela, and that's being impacted much harder. And as such, the population there in the Appalachian is declining because of that.
Oh, wow. So what are some of the other technologies that are being used to track birds, or is this mainly it?
No, geolocators are just kind of the start. The latest thing now is a thing called nano tags, and it's part of a network called MODIS, which is a wildlife tracking system that's been put together. Basically the same kind of little backpack, a temporary backpack that goes on the back of the bird. And you can see here from the map that all those blue dots are where MODIS tower locations are located. And this transmitter pings, basically. It sends out a signal, much like a cell phone sends out a signal. And if these birds fly over a tower or within about 15 kilometers of where a tower is, that tower will pick up and record that specific nano tag. You can see here, this is a piping plover. You can see the antenna off of the back here. Again, these are temporary. They fall off after a time and the battery dies. So this is a new technology. Towers are going up all over. They're putting up a bunch of towers across New England now that will be basically a curtain to catch any movement of birds going back and forth and follow their migration path.
So when you say they fall off, is that they fall off after a season or at the end of migration, or how long do they last?
Usually less than a year. The harnesses or the techniques that they use when the birds begin to molt their feathers They'll fall off with the feathers, or the harnesses are designed to decompose. And so then they'll fall off after a time, so the bird is unhindered.
Right. So are there other species that use these kinds of tags you're tracking?
Well, it's real. What's really cool about this tracking system is, we focus a lot on birds, but there's a number of other animals that migrate out there. Bats, for instance, are a migratory species, and they can be fitted with a modus, a nano tag, in order to track their movements. And some of these tags have gotten so small now in size, it changes from year to year, that even things like dragonflies can be fitted with these things, and dragonflies migrate. So we're learning all sorts of things about animal movements by the use of these nanotag technologies.
That's just remarkable, and that was one of the towers behind that dragonfly. That was a
Yes,
remarkable
it was.
picture.
Yep.
So yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, how are the signals from the nano tags picked up? I mean, how does that? It's like a radio signal.
Yeah, so each one of those tags has a unique signal that it sends out. And as you said, with that dragonfly shot, towers are set up all across along the Atlantic coast, all across Pennsylvania now. Again, they'll be through New England. And these towers basically are antennas that pick up the ping, the signal from these nano tags. Here's a picture of last winter. I was down in the Bahamas, and as part of the piping plover work, they set up a tower on Andros Island. And so we were there to do a little tower maintenance with the crew from the Bahamas National Trust, which manages that tower. And all of this information is sent to Bird Studies Canada, who manages the information and holds it so that folks can then look at it. Folks that are doing research that might want to know where their birds are going or their dragonflies are going, all that information is then available to them and other researchers.
Right, and the Bahamas seems important. I mean, even your golden-winged warbler seems to on their way to Central America. That's the pathway.
That's correct.
Right.
So, there's a big effort to get these towers up all over. We've had a lot of success here in the eastern U.S. and portions of the western U.S.
Is this one in Vermont? Okay.
Yeah, so this is Vermont. This is down at Buckner, the Helen F. Buckner Preserve. It's a Nature Conservancy property down in West Haven. And so we set up a Modus tower there, right at the base of basically Chittenden Valley, with the idea that, not Chittenden, but Champlain Valley, with the idea that the Champlain Valley is a big migratory pathway. So this is us, TNC staff and Audubon staff, setting up that tower. And here you can see the tower. We affixed it to an old barn that's there. And that covers the entire, southern end of the lake. The West Haven is down on the west side of Vermont, just north of Whitehall, New York.
Wow.
So we really hope to put up more towers here in Vermont, and as I said, across New England, as part of some new funding that has become available to create this array or curtain to catch these animals, birds, dragonflies, bats that are carrying these nanotags as they head south and potentially head north.
So has that Buckner Tower in southern Vermont picked up some nanotags?
Yeah, so we do have one hit that we got, which was from last fall. And this is a species that we see here in Vermont, the horned lark. You can see this, the little horns on the back of that individual. And this is a bird that likes open grasslands. We find it mostly in the Champlain Valley in the wintertime. It comes down and spends time with us. And you can see here, all of those circles on this map are actual tower locations and the radius that they can actually pick up, pings. And you can see that bird started way north up in Quebec, moved down through the St. Lawrence River Valley and pinged off our tower in the Champlain Valley. So That's a very straight line. My guess is that bird probably followed a different path a little further west, staying to the grassland and open areas. But who knows? Maybe it made that migration over the top of the hills.
Right. So that one would go on further south, one would assume,
Potentially,
or not.
potentially, like I said, these birds do stay in Vermont in the winter. I don't believe that bird was picked up at any other tower, so that might have been a bird that stayed around maybe a little bit further to the south of us, just outside of a tower location. And that's one of the reasons we're really looking to put up more of these towers so that we can, kind of fill in the puzzle and the gaps as to where a lot of these species are moving.
Right. So are there some new ahas that you've been finding, or is it so new that you're not? That's yet to come.
Well, it's funny. There's been work on specific species, that researchers are able to then translate and put in. I don't think, for us right now here in Vermont, we haven't had any ahas. But the fact that the Piping Plover Project, for instance, was able to track their birds to some of the breeding locations in along the Atlantic coast,
Mm-hmm.
as well as pick up birds there on Andros Island to let us know how these birds are using both their breeding grounds and their wintering grounds.
Wow.
And the Bahamas are an important part of the full life cycle of piping plovers, so that's important information to know.
This is really exciting stuff, Mark. Thank you so much for enlightening us about it, and we look forward to hearing more about it in the future as you find out more information.
We'll let you know.
Okay. If you have a bird-related question, you can pass it along to Mark at the address on your screen, or you can drop Mark an email. His address is mlabar@audubon.org. You can send Mark your questions and pictures, and he'll try to answer all those for you on an upcoming edition of Bird Notes. Again, many thanks, Mark. Have a great rest of the season, and we will see you next month.
All right, good birding to all.
Okay, thanks. And thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.